about, oh gosh, 11 years ago, um, when there was about two incompetent prime ministers ago, I think is the way to describe it, is when I decided to leave the UK. Um, and one of the things that the Institute of Physics was running at that time was something called an air rocket workshop. And when you think of air rockets, you normally think of like a soda bottle, a 2 liter soda bottle filled up with a little bit of water, stuck inside of a, like a bicycle pedal of some kind, and the water, like build up the pressure, you pump it, the pressure will become too much at a certain point, and the water will spurt out, and you'll maybe launch that bottle like 2 meters in the air. It's As a physicist and as someone with a degree in physics with space science and technology, yes, I'm flexing on my degree. I will totally do that any opportunity I get. It's pretty underwhelming. Gas copper pipe. It's essentially what they're using is a gas copper pipe. The other end of the U shape is sealed off, and on one end you've got two valves. You've got a valve that's connected to a bicycle valve, on a classic sort of tire bicycle valve, and you've got a quick release sort of valve. Basically, if you've ever had to turn a gas tap off at your home, or if you're a science teacher, it's really, really worthwhile checking out from the Institute of Physics. They will still do it. They provided me all of the kit to make it, but they also have all of the instructions as well, so you can go and purchase it. The kit itself is probably quite expensive. It's probably around 30 or 40 pounds, because it's copper piping with special valves and things like that. But it's stuff that you can easily purchase from all hardware stores essentially and put together. They will give you training on how to assemble it and also how to safely operate it. But if you check out their website, if you type in Institute of Physics Air Rocket online, you will easily find links to either their training sessions or how to safely build it at home. It's one of the funnest end of school activities I do for physics. We can do some great, fantastic investigations because you can launch it at certain angles, and then we can lead into really good physics research questions like, what is the best angle to launch a rocket at, or a projectile at, in order for it to travel the furthest distance? And one thing that we can do beforehand is actually try and calculate what best angle would be theoretically. And if you're doing this with an A-level physics class, you could probably even do this with a GCSE class as well. You could definitely launch it at any stage. I've launched these rockets quite easily at like key stage 3, and they absolutely love it. But you can do really good investigations, like working out like what's the optimal angle to launch it. When you work out the theoretical angle, spoiler alert, the theoretical angle is 45 degrees, will give you the best launch distance, but that doesn't take into account air resistance. So then what you'll find is that actually around 30 degrees is probably a better angle to get a further distance. That leads into a big discussion. Excuse me. That leads into a big discussion then about, like theoretical versus theoretical versus practical. What other things are we going to have to take into account for all of these kind of things? See, sorry, apologies if I mispronounce people's names. Seema's just texted in to say, um, sounds interesting. I imagine the kids would be impressed. And also said, sorry, I know my comments are distracting your train of thought. Please distract my train of thought. I absolutely love it when people text in. It will distract me for about 10 seconds because that means that I have something to actually talk about that's interesting as opposed to me just waffling for like an hour and a half. So please do text in. It is absolutely, the kids absolutely love it. If you, also I would say any even below primary would be really good. The most important thing is that they have to understand the safety implications of it, because these, it's just a piece of paper. It's essentially an A4 piece of paper rolled up with a cone on the end of it that's sticky taped on, and you wouldn't think they can go, but they go very fast, like the speed, I would say, like the speed a baseball is hit or a cricket ball is hit, something along those lines. So it could really hurt someone if they are stood right in front of it. But obviously, if you do the IOP training course, teach you all of the safety implications involved, and also the safety implications are very much common sense as well, very much common sense for want of a better word. So we're talking this afternoon, or sorry, this evening, I should say. It's the afternoon over here. We're talking this afternoon about what kind of activities are good for the end of the year. What kind of activities do you do with your students? Have any of your activities this year been disrupted by the pandemic? So, for example, has your, is this the time where you would normally do a sports day or a residential course? What kind of, how has the pandemic impacted your end of term plans? For me, it's very much the opposite. So I'm going back into school. We're basically treating these 3 weeks as like an end of term activity. The main goal for all of us is the main goal for all of us here is to make sure the students feel happy and healthy inside of school, and that the teachers also feel happy and healthy inside of school. This week we've been mainly doing pastoral activities. The biggest challenge that we found is that we obviously, while in a class, we have a limited number inside of a class. So that we can physically distance ourselves and the students. And students also have to wear a mask at all times, teachers as well when they're teaching. The only exception would be if you're eating outside. We're very fortunate as well in Mexico that we have a lot of outdoor space, and the weather is pretty kind with us most of the time. However, in true Murphy's Law fashion, yesterday was the first day back for students, and it's the rainy season here as well. But when I say rainy season, it basically means it will rain at 4 o'clock and it will stop raining at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. But it won't rain in the morning, it won't rain at night, it will just rain for those times. It's almost like clockwork. Yes, definitely rains more in Manchester. You'd be surprised. Right now, the temperature here is cold. Brace yourself, folks. It's cold. It's under 20 degrees Celsius. I've had to wear a jumper. It's the end times. But also it means it is quite raining. The problem, that's our summer. That's our summer here too. The summer here gets a little chilly. Our winter gets to this temperature too. So at the moment, people are like, oh, it's really cold. It's really cold. Also, the school that I teach in is on a hill. Most people in Mexico City live at an altitude of around 2,200 meters. That's where pretty much all of the city stuff is. But the school is up on a hill, just not in the suburbs, but yeah, in the outskirts of the city. So we go up 500 meters essentially from Mexico City, and teachers, if they're living in the city center, if they commute into school, they will increase in elevation by about 500 meters. And so, for example, I live right by the school, so we live at 2,700 meters. I notice I don't really notice the cold right now because I've been living on a hill for like a year and a half and not left anywhere. But teachers that have come from the city go, whoa, it's about 5 degrees colder than it is in the city center. So it's probably about, so if you ever see a weather report of like it being 22 degrees in Mexico City, it's probably about 18 degrees where I am. So it does kind of affect it just a smidge. But in typical Murphy's Law fashion, yesterday, 7 a.m., it was absolutely chucking it down. It was pretty torrential rain. We were trying to greet all of the students that were coming in. And then basically luckily we only had half of 1 year group in that day. So a lot of our spaces that are safe for them to socially distance while they're having a break and things like that would be outdoors. Luckily, that's not going to be the case next week. Hopefully the rains will hold up, or they'll just happen in the afternoon. It wasn't rainy this morning, for example. It was just kind of a freak occurrence, but just typical sod's law that would happen. that would happen at this time. So yeah, so please join us for the rest of the show. We've got another hour with you here on the Late Late Show with me, Rich Wrigley. What we'll be talking about for the next 15 minutes or so is meaningful activities that you can do with your students at the end of lessons. What kind of ideas have you got? I'll be sharing some of my experiences as a science teacher, but also doing outreach work and things like that. What kind of activities are beneficial for you? But please do text in. I love to hear from everyone. Even though it does distract me slightly, please do. If you hear me going, that just means that I'm trying to figure out who said what because my dyslexia has kicked in. But please do text in. I love hearing from all of you all. It really makes me happy, and I love discussing with you all of these kind of things. We're going to pause briefly for the news, and then we'll be back momentarily on the Late Late Show with me, Rich Wrigley.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Megan Goods.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News. The latest modelled data from the Office for National Statistics has led to calls from school leaders to prioritise vaccinations for anyone over the age of 12. The data highlighted that students in years 7 to 11 in secondary schools had the highest infection rate of any age group, with one case in every 210 on the 2nd of June. At the start of May, the same age group's rate was over 4 times lower. One professor of infectious diseases at the University of Edinburgh, Mark Woolhouse, doesn't think the increased infection rate is a cause for concern just yet, saying, "If the Delta variant is much more transmissible in children, it might raise the R number in schools above 1, and then you would consistently start to see larger outbreaks more frequently in schools. So far, I don't think the PHE data are convincing on that. Yes, there are outbreaks in schools, but it's a tiny fraction of them." The Children's Commissioner has said that the ease of access for children to online pornography is a key factor in the normalising of sexual harassment in schools. Dame Rachel de Souza stated, "One area I'm clear on is that online hardcore pornography warps boys' expectations of normal relationships and normalises behaviours that girls are then expected to accept, and it's just too easy for children to access." She has called for internet companies to introduce more restrictions on what children can access online, and also plans to work with tech companies, law enforcement, children's charities and schools on how to make children safer online. The Duchess of Cambridge and First Lady Dr. Jill Biden met for the first time last week as they visited Connor Downs Academy in Cornwall. They have since written a joint article stating the importance of early education for children. The letter, published by CNN, said, "If we care about how children perform at school, how they succeed in their careers when they are older, and about their lifelong mental and physical health, then we have to care about how we are nurturing their brains, their experiences and relationships in the early years before school." That was your latest Teachers Talk Radio News.
Thank you. And that was the news. You're joining me live on the Late Late Show with me, Rich Wrigley. It is 10:30 in the UK. It's 4:30 here. We've been talking for the first half hour about end of term activities. What kind of things have you attempted with your students this year? Has your end of term been any different? It may be that you've not even thought of it yet with tags, all of those kind of things happening. So what have you been doing this year to as an end of term activity? I'd love to hear from people. Please do text in. We'll be talking about that for another 15 minutes or so, and then we'll be talking about CPD and meaningful CPD and what kind of training people want and is beneficial for people. So please do text in. I will probably stumble over reading your messages out, but don't let that stop you. I find it I really love hearing from folks, and it's a lot better than me just sort of talking into the void for an hour and a half. So you're joining me live on the Late Late Show with me, Rich Wrigley, and we've been talking about some of the activities that you can do at the end of term. For me, it's basically any kind of hands-on practical activities that we can do with students. I found that at the end of the year, one of the things sorry, Roger just texted in to say your multitask game makes me laugh every time. I'm just so good at reading out loud. You should see me do. I've been doing online learning for a year and a half now, and basically I will have students message their answers in, and it's the exact same situation as well. I'll be like, right, mid-flow, sharing my screen, all's good, and then it's like, whoa, wait a second, folks, someone's just put something in the chat, let me read it, and then it's like, sir, are these so like are these notes on Insta, are these notes on the Google Classroom? I'm like, yes, I said that right at the beginning of the lesson, that these notes are on Google Classroom, and I showed you how to get them, but never mind. And apologies, yes, of course, it's Tom Rogers who's messaging, not Rogers. Apologies for that, Tom. It's my multitask game kicking in again. So what can I say? But we've been talking about sort of end of term activities and things we can do with our students, primarily in secondary school. But I'd also love to hear from what primary teachers are doing as well. We have a primary school sort of attached with us in the secondary school that I work with. It's under like one big school, but we kind of never seem to like share what we're doing, even in fun stuff like terms of like science fairs and things like that. We very rarely will get primary school teachers, primary students involved with secondary activities and secondary students involved with primary activities, other than things like Christmas concerts and whatnot. But in terms of like ends of term activities and stuff, we don't really take much of a sort of like a united approach to that. We're very much left up to what we do. One of the things that we would normally do as well, or that in many schools would be sports days and things like that. That's something that here we really struggle with, because I don't know if you've noticed, but Mexico City is quite a big city. So it basically means that space is at a crazy premium. So we have, for example, football pitches on top of buildings. So for example, a football pitch, like a small sort of like 7-a-side football pitch on top of the art block. The art teachers absolutely love having to teach during a lunchtime because we have split lunches, and they can hear year 7 attempting to play football right above them, directly above them. But the problem is, because we're so limited for space, we've not been able to do things in a long time for things like sports days and activities like that, other than sort of like clubs after school that are very much on sort of a voluntary basis, which is one of the things I really miss from teaching in the UK. It's just something that we can't really do here. It's also something that's not really a thing here compared to other countries that I've taught in. Physical education, PE in general, is really not something that that is widely valued in Mexican schools, I would say. Basically, the other school that I taught in Mexico City had a football pitch and a basketball court for around 400 students. That was about it. And sometimes in a sort of covered area, they were able to put up a volleyball court that was kind of like in a little courtyard. And that was it. So students here, it's very rare that schools will have changing rooms for students or showers or anything like that. So basically, if you have PE on the day, the day that you have PE, you just show up in your PE kit. It's normally like tracksuit, whatever kind of thing. And you do PE in that, but you do all of your lessons in that as well. Let me tell you that if year 9 have PE and then you have them directly after on a Friday afternoon or something like that, it is absolutely grim. It is really, really grim. I'm just very glad that my classroom has a lot of windows. That's all I can say. But it's very, in terms of like the culture of sports day, PE and things like that, it's not really done here. Normally what would happen is you would rent an area to go and actually do a sports day. So other schools that I've worked in will rent essentially like a ranch is the best way I can describe it. Outside of the city, you have huge like ranches, cabins, cabanas, they're called, like cabins where people can go like camping and things like that and get fresh air. But they'll also have football pitches, maybe a running track, and schools will rent them for a day and then do the classic stuff of, you know, running races, football competitions, basketball competitions. Those are always a big thing, as well as, you know, like classic sports day activities, you know, like three-legged race, all of those kind of things. But it's very, very difficult to facilitate it within a school. I remember my wife was telling me about her experience. My wife is Mexican. I remember her telling me her experiences of being a secondary school student here and what PE involved. And basically it was like, oh, well, if you don't like football, then that's about it. You can't do anything else. Sometimes they would do dance, and it's like choreographies of dance. And I was like, okay. And I feel like, although I grew up all over the world, I spent most of my secondary time in a state school in the UK. And I forgot how fortunate and privileged I was to be able to really get into so many sports compared to other countries. My school was a general, you know, state school. It was a good state school, but it was also really, really fortunate that it had been built a long time ago. It was in the suburbs of Southampton, and that meant that it had a lot of space. It sold some of its playing fields to a real estate agent before, you know, to a real estate developer before I went to the school. But it still meant that we had 2 full-size football pitches, a rugby pitch, tennis courts, an AstroTurf pitch, and other little spaces as well. Plus, like, you know, 2 indoor gymnasiums, one that was quite small, but one that was like a full-size basketball court. And I think that probably one of the biggest shocks to PE teachers that come from the UK is the kind of facilities that we have in schools in Mexico City. It basically means that, yeah, you've not got much. you've got an outside basketball court and an outside football pitch, and you're going to have to be super creative. But fortunately, our PE teachers are absolutely fantastic here, and they're really, really creative, and they just kind of power through what they have to put up with. So we're talking about sort of end of term activities. How have your end of term activities been affected by COVID? Please do text in. I'd love to hear from you. Are you carrying on as regular, or are you doing something different this year? What things have you found that works really, really well? I've personally found any kind of team building activities are always really fantastic. Another opportunity as well that I found that was really, really useful was basically, if you are running a Duke of Edinburgh Awards program, anything along those lines, that's something that's absolutely fantastic to get involved with as well, and to get kids and students involved in at that time, because it's fairly low stakes in the last few weeks of term, in my opinion. It's just my opinion, but it means that you can maybe take that time to do more residential activities and take things, get students involved in things that they may not necessarily have the time to do during other times in the term when it's kind of a pinch point in the year. Okay, we're going to pause very briefly for a commercial, and then we'll start. Please do text in. We'll spend a couple more minutes talking about end of term activities, and then we'll start talking about CPD. So please do text in with either your thoughts on what do you do for the end of term activities, what things are meaningful, but also please do text in. We'll be talking briefly about CPD as well, as what kind of CPD that you value as a teacher, what kind of CPD are you looking to do, but also what's some of your CPD horror stories. What's the worst CPD course that you have been on recently? I'd love to hear from you. Please do text in, and we'll just pause for a few messages from some of our sponsors on Teachers Talk Radio. You're listening to the Late Late Show with me, Rich Wrigley.
Introducing Amanda Davey. Amanda is one of the first specialist teacher assessors for dyscalculia in the UK and offers dyscalculia tutoring and bespoke training for schools. With 26 years of teaching and tutoring experience in the UK, Amanda offers specialist online tuition focused on building confidence and developing skills. Amanda also offers online and face-to-face training on dyscalculia for educators, informing practitioners as to how to identify children that may have dyscalculia and how to support them in class. Find out more about Amanda and what she can offer you at www.amanda-davey-dyscalculia.co.uk. Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. At Creative Resources, we've been rethinking what a classroom can be. We've created a huge range of more than 2,500 original and exciting resources that span across more than 15 different subject areas. Whether you're looking for primary or secondary level resources, careers options, PSHE, arts, or humanities, Creative Resources have the resources for you. We offer full curriculum packages and unique, challenging escape rooms themed on topics such as Shakespeare, Tudors, and fractions. We have quizzes, task cards, Tarsia puzzles, and lots more. Better still, more than 100 resources can be accessed for free. Just visit our website, www.cre8tiveresources.com. You can get 10% off any order you make on our website by using the discount code TT Radio. Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers.
Cool, thanks for that. So you're joining me live on the Late Late Show with me, Rich Wrigley, and we'll just finish up talking about any CPD, any end of term activities. If you have any ideas for good end of term activities for secondary students, for non-secondary students, for primary students, I should say, sorry, please do text in, and we'll start talking about CPD and what makes a good CPD course for you. So in terms of talking about meaningful CPD, I'll first say, like, what do I mean by meaningful CPD? I mean, it's something that's not just a feel-good exercise, and something that actually gives people some practical skills or uses, toolkit for the classroom, to use a very inelegant phrase. What are some of your horror stories for CPD? What were some of the worst, most pointless training courses that you have been on? Please use this time to vent. We're all here. It's a safe space. You can all kind of just, share. You can, if people want to vent and message anonymously, I'm more than happy to do that as well. But yeah, please do message in. What are some of the, what is a good CPD course for you? What are you looking to improve upon in the future? But also, what are some of your horror stories of CPD? For me, I think we'll start off positively for me. Please do text in as well. I love reading out all of your messages as well. Rich's radio show is a good CPD course. Thanks, Tom. I hope it's more of a how to do a radio show than more how to not do a radio show. Other than that, it's either just old man Rich like yelling at clouds, for want of a better word, about this is how you should do CPD and things like that. I think for me, the most beneficial CPD course I've ever done is something I did off my own bat. It was a mixture. My previous school in Mexico sent me on a Google Apps for Education training course. Our school was just starting to adopt Google Apps in school, as well as this was just at the time that Google Classroom was starting to be rolled out. It didn't have all the features it does now, but it was absolutely fantastic. It was one of the best CPD courses because I was starting to have middle leadership sort of responsibilities, and it showed me how to actually run a good CPD day, a good inset day. So I would say the talks that they gave me probably weren't that memorable. My memory's terrible, as you can probably understand, but they trained me a lot on how to actually use the technology that was on offer from Google, but with a practical output of like, here's how you could use it here's how your students could use this feature, or here's how you could use this feature when you're teaching this group of students. Here's how you could do this, this, and this, which was really fantastic. But the thing that really made it stood out for me was how people approached the course, or how people approached, like, how the organizers set out the course. One of the things that they did was, it was like, right, okay, we're going to do no more than 30-minute talks, because no one can last more than 30 minutes listening to someone talk, and it's also really a pain in the butt for the teachers to try and extend that. But then on top of that, we're going to have 15-minute breaks in between. And then the idea is that if you want to take a break, cool, but if you want to then talk to the person running the course, ask any questions, you can at that point, because there is absolutely nothing worse than sitting through a presentation with like 200 people in the auditorium, and it's already lasted more than about 45 minutes, so you're already starting to lose the will to live. One of the reasons why I think teachers start to lose the will to live during a longer course is, I have a hypothesis that, just like doctors, there's a saying that doctors make the worst patients. For me, teachers make the worst students. So normally in normal times on a CPD course, you will find me at the back of the auditorium probably mucking around, making or trying to figure out a way of not paying attention so I can skive off and do other things. I think my proudest moment was using a VPN to stream a football match in Brazil during. I hope none of my management in Brazil were listening to me at this time. To stream a football match of Southampton during a talk. But yeah, anyway, getting back to that, there is nothing worse than after a 45-minute or longer talk, the person delivering the course goes, "Any questions?" And I was like, "No, don't do that. Please don't do that." Because then basically what's going to happen is you're going to have 30 people who want to just talk for the sake of talking, kind of like me right now. So just want to talk for the sake of talking, or just show off that they're so clever, or ask a question that's completely unimportant or irrelevant to actually what the presenter was actually talking about. So what they found was, I found that, oh right, if you structure it like 30 minutes at a time, maybe 40 minutes, and then have a 15-minute break, then those people who want to ask questions, you basically, every presenter, and there was about 10 presenters during the day, said, right, okay, cool, that's the end of my session. If you want to stay around and try something out with, you know, some of the stuff I've shown you, I'm here. If you want to ask me any questions, you can. Everyone else, go grab a coffee. It gives you a lot of trust, and I feel like in a lot of training courses or training days, you're kind of shepherded around like students, and that kind of takes out that kind of autonomy as well. So that was hands down one of the best courses I'd been on. In the UK, if you are a science teacher, for me, one of the best CPD courses that are run by the STEM outreach groups. They're based it's the Science Learning Centre in York. They do absolutely fantastic work. Normally a lot of the stuff is free, or you can find a lot of things that are free as well. Also, on that note, I used to teach in Leicester. That's where I started my teacher training and taught there for a couple of years before I moved abroad. If you're a science teacher, or if you're a secondary science teacher, if you are a primary science teacher, you need to check out the National Space Centre, and primarily it's called the Space Teachers Academy, or the Space Teachers Academy. I don't know if it's still running, but there are a lot of things that are running. If you just basically type into Google CPD, National Space Centre for teachers, you will be inundated with loads of useful resources. Basically, I discovered them in my first year of teaching, in my NQT year of teaching. I won't name the school I was at, but basically I was at a school that wasn't very supportive for NQTs. I literally met with my NQT teacher, my NQT mentor, over the course of my NQT year for no more than 2 hours over the course of the entire academic year. She lesson observed me and basically went, "Yep, everything's great, cool," and then wandered off. Because I had a rapport with the student, she was like, "Yeah, that's fine. You're all good. Head off. You know, carry on teaching." My head of department was near retirement, and basically he was head of physics. He basically managed to give himself no physics classes, and just all classes that were not exam classes, and that would leave at the end, would leave early. I don't know how he managed to do that. So basically what it meant was that I was teaching in my NQT year, I think it was about 7 or 8 different courses that were brand new to me, 7 or 8 different curriculum that were brand new to me. I had inherited no resources, and the department's, either teaching resources but also practical resources were very thin on the ground. The school had just moved into a new building and basically spent all of their money moving into a new building, and not spent any money on improving any of the resources inside of the school. So I was kind of like hit with a triple whammy of way too many classes to easily manage. I was also over my time allowance for an NQT at the time, which was fantastic. Loads of exam classes, so loads of pressure there. And also on top of that, very little resources or support from people who should have really given me support. It was very, very rough 2 years, I would say, teaching there. At the end of the year, at the end of the 2 years in my exit interview, they legitimately asked me, "Rich, why do you want to leave this school?" And I was like, "You're kidding, right?" I've told you about 1 billion times, but anyway, I'm not here to be negative about that, and I'm not going to name the school for obvious reasons. But it really, really made me a very sort of self-motivated individual in terms of finding out how I can, improve my teaching. And one of the lights or the beacons in that year, and I know it sounds a little cheesy and a little bit of, we would say gringo here, like a very, very cheesy thing to say, but I would say the National Space Centre and the the teaching resources that they offered for a NQT science teacher were so valuable and were at such a low cost. I think the cost of most of their training courses were, they basically told me on one day that they have to charge something because otherwise people won't value it. So basically what they do is they charge, or they used to, I hope they still do, they basically charge like enough that most people would be like, yeah, sure, no problem, go on it. So yeah, the National Space Center teachers space conference, or Academy of Space Teachers, something along those lines. They are absolutely fantastic. They really gave me a lot of practical based sort of ideas to improve as a teacher. It could be the case now that if you've been a teacher for more than 5 years, you've probably seen a lot of those resources and gone, yeah, I pretty much understand what's happening here. But it's definitely worth it for the sort of what's the word, for the content that you have, or for the content that you've been given over the course of 2 days. The price is super cheap. I got so many resources just going there. I got given like space atlases. I got given like loads of cool teaching idea, like manuals and things like that, loads of PDFs. There was also loads of cool things given out from the Institute of Physics. They would work with the Institute of Physics and they would come in and do workshops as well. So yeah, if you're a secondary science teacher or even a primary science teacher, check them out because they have loads of hands-on activities that really make things worthwhile. The other, talking about physics and CPD, I'm going to have to big up as well Chat Physics. As many of you know, a few teachers here on Teachers Talk Radio also work for Chat Physics, which is, well, not works for, but volunteer our time for Chat Physics, which is a Twitter community of physics teachers. It was founded about 2 years ago by a teacher who basically realized that he was the only physics teacher in his school and wasn't really able to have those kind of coffee moments with other teachers in the staff room and share ideas. Kind of similar to what I experienced as well in my NQT year, but obviously just because there were no other teachers around, it wasn't a similar kind of situation. A lot of physics teachers do tend to be in that situation, because we're very antisocial. We're kind of those people who will stare at our feet. A win in a conversation for us is to look someone directly in the eye, but that generally means that we also, because of the nature of the course, normally or because of the scarcity of physics teachers, you'll normally find that you're probably the only subject specialist in school. Maybe there might be one other teacher, and that's generally the case. I've been very fortunate in most schools that I have at least one other physics teacher with me, even small schools. And in my school in Germany, the head of science was a physics teacher. And so in his wisdom, and this is absolutely brilliant, he basically hired nothing but physics teachers, which was fantastic. So basically, anytime we needed a new science teacher, we were like, yep, they teach physics, cool. And physics was one of the most popular subjects, so it was definitely needed. It wasn't like we were just hiring non-specialists for the sake of it. But we had got to the point where we had 1, 2, 3, 4. We had 5 physics teachers in a faculty, which was absolutely amazing. We outnumbered everyone else. It was the first time I'd ever experienced it. But generally, that's not the case. Normally what happens is you have one, maybe two, one other, you're either by yourself, maybe one other teacher in a school. And you really lose that opportunity to share ideas, particularly, I would say, for Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5 at that age. We have, chemistry teachers and biology teachers and general science teachers who are absolutely fantastic. Don't get me wrong, and I'm not trying to, throw shade at them or anything like that, so please don't get me wrong. But obviously, if you're teaching an A-level physics class, you're going to be a subject specialist in it, and sometimes it's very hard to think, oh, well, that lesson didn't work. You very rarely have that opportunity to sit down in the staff room and go, oh, I'm really struggling with this topic. And, someone just going, oh, why don't you try this? Or, have a go at this. This is what I normally do for this kind of things. We lose that opportunity because of the nature of how few teachers there normally are for physics in a school. So that means that when for groups like Chat Physics, where it's an online support group, is probably the best way to describe it, but it's a really good place where we can share ideas with each other. It's weekly sort of chats that happen. There's also now Chat Biology and Chat Chemistry as well, for other specialists as well. But Chat Physics, I would say, is like originally how it started up, and it's been really wonderful to be able to share ideas in terms of things from teacher assessed grades to practical solutions to, like online solutions during the pandemic. Even to more recently, we've been talking about, inclusion and diversity within physics, particularly during Pride, and how we can include more LGBTQ plus people within STEM and particularly within physics, because there are far too many Y chromosomes in physics, in my opinion. We need to definitely kind of like improve how physics is perceived by everyone and make it way more accessible to everyone. But chat physics has been absolutely wonderful in a way of sort of sharing ideas. And if you are interested at all, about any kind of ideas of how to improve your teaching in physics, if you either go to Chat Physics or you search online Chat Physics Live, as a week-long, how can you say it, online CPD course. It's totally free. Each day we would release about 4 or 5 different videos so that you could train or get CPD in certain aspects of physics asynchronously. So on there's about 25 different videos, each about no more than 15 minutes long, explaining how, discussing a certain area in physics, also trying to link it into bigger areas. So for example, linking it into theory of knowledge, which we've talked about in a previous episode, linking physics into hinterland, but also explaining certain teaching practices in physics as well. The keynote speech as well, the coolest thing as well is that keynote speech was given by Jim Al-Khalili, of great science communicator. And also check out my talk as well that I give there, which is called Creative Practicals or Creative Experiments on a Budget. So yeah, it's a really fantastic resource. I'm going to big it up as well as one of the best CPD courses I've been on, because the other talks that I attended were absolutely fantastic. And also I gave a talk as well. So of course I'm going to big that up as one of my one of my favorite CPD courses. But I'd love to hear from you. What kind of CPD courses have you found really beneficial? What kind of structure of a CPD course have you found beneficial? What kind of themes have you found really beneficial? But also, what are some of your horror stories from CPD courses or inset courses that you have been on? I'd love to hear from those as well. We've got 30 minutes to vent and talk about sort of terrible CPD courses that we've all been forced to be on. But we're going to pause ever so slightly to just hear the news again. It's coming up to 11 p.m. UK. So you're listening to the Late Late Show with me, Rich Wrigley. We're just going to pause again very briefly for the news.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Megan Goods.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News. The latest modelled data from the Office for National Statistics has led to calls from school leaders to prioritise vaccinations for anyone over the age of 12. The data highlighted that students in years 7 to 11 in secondary schools had the highest infection rate of any age group, with 1 case in every 210 on the 2nd of June. At the start of May, the same age group's rate was over 4 times lower. One professor of infectious diseases at the University of Edinburgh, Mark Woolhouse, doesn't think the increased infection rate is a cause for concern just yet, saying, "If the Delta variant is much more transmissible in children, it might raise the R number in schools above 1, and then you would consistently start to see larger outbreaks more frequently in schools. So far, I don't think the PHE data are convincing on that. Yes, there are outbreaks in schools, but it's a tiny fraction of them." The Children's Commissioner has said that the ease of access for children to online pornography is a key factor in the normalising of sexual harassment in schools. Dame Rachel de Souza stated, "One area I'm clear on is that online hardcore pornography warps boys' expectations of normal relationships and normalises behaviours that girls are then expected to accept, and it's just too easy for children to access." She has called for internet companies to introduce more restrictions on what children can access online, and also plans to work with tech companies, law enforcement, children's charities, and schools on how to make children safer online. The Duchess of Cambridge and First Lady Dr. Jill Biden met for the first time last week as they visited Connor Downs Academy in Cornwall. They have since written a joint article stating the importance of early education for children. The letter, published by CNN, said, "If we care about how children perform at school, how they succeed in their careers when they are older, and about their lifelong mental and physical health, then we have to care about how we are nurturing their brains, their experiences and relationships in the early years before school." That was your latest Teachers Talk Radio News.
Thanks, and you're listening. That was the news, and you're listening to the Late Late Show with me, Rich Wrigley. We're talking about CPD, inset days. What have been some of the best CP days for you? What have you found the most effective in improving your teaching? I'd love to hear from you. Please do text in. What are some of the things that you found most effective in terms of CPD? What are some of the things that you wish you could say to your line manager and say, look, I really need to go on this course. I feel it would be really beneficial. I'd love to hear from you. Please do text in. I'll read out all of your comments, and I will try at the same time not to get confused by reading and talking at the same time. But we're also going to be talking about what are some of our horror stories of CPD. Please do text in as well what some of the most annoying CPD courses or painful, cringeworthy CPD courses you've been on. Some of the best CPD courses have been run for Google Apps for Education. One of the things you can do as well is get a Google Certified Education Certificate. You can do that online as well. That's something I'm working towards. But also from the National Space Center, the Science Teachers Academy, I believe, or Space Teachers Academy is absolutely fantastic as well for offering courses, as well as Chat Physics. If you were a science teacher or physics teacher, check them out. They do an online course that's live called Chat Physics Live. In terms of some of the most horror show CPD courses, I think it's more about how it's organized for me. I love teaching in Mexico, but I'm going to have to be a bit shady towards some people here in a second. There's no disrespect intended. But it's very traditional in how teaching is perceived here. So it's still very much a sense that if you are a teacher, you stand up in front of the class and you talk at them for a very long period of time. And the longer you talk, it means the more they have learnt. Similar thing, like the longer students in school, the more they have learnt. It really changed. It is changing slowly. And we, like I would say as well, like this isn't on the whole, a generic thing, but I have noticed that a lot more here than in other countries. And one of the things I've noticed as well is that this translates over a lot to CPD courses as well. So I remember recently having a CPD course on mental well-being that was mandatory. As someone who values their mental health a lot, I think mandatory courses on mental well-being probably not the best ideas in the world. Yes, and it was mainly talking at you about different types of mental health. In fact, when I got married here, one of the things that you had to do before you got married is when you get married in Mexico, you normally have a civil wedding, which is very, very low key. It's literally just like, you are now legally married. And then you'll have a ceremonial wedding. So if you're religious, you have it in a church or wherever place of worship that you have. And for me, for me and my wife, although my wife is, comes from a Catholic background, she's not practicing Catholic. We had a sort of ceremonial wedding afterwards on the beach of Cancun because apparently we're those kinds of people. But before that, we had a civil wedding in a registry office, essentially. And that's very, very common here. Most people just have a very quiet thing, and then it will be very close family and not really much of a big deal. We don't even see it as our anniversary, even though our civil wedding happened, I think about 6 weeks before our actual wedding. So it's, there is a bit of a difference. But we don't see it as our our anniversary or whatever. It's just that's the day we legally got married. So it's very, very low key. But one of the things that the government introduced in order to reduce the number of divorce rates, which is great thinking here, was that you would have to take a mandatory course on what is marriage by the government in the registry office. Me and my wife did it literally on the day before we got married. We literally went to the registry office. There was a slot for a class on what is marriage. 3 hours before we were due to get married, so it's supposed to last 30 minutes. So we're like, yeah, we'll go early, we'll do it and get it out of the way. It's much easier, and things like that. And basically what happened was there was a person who came up and stood at the front and talked to us for 45 minutes about what is marriage, and then listed all of the different types of abuse that can happen in a marriage and everything like that. And I was like, wow, this is very, very cheery. And there were other people getting married on the same day as well. There were people, like they were talking about rates of divorce and everything like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is just boring. Kill me now. Please kill me now. And it was the most painful thing in the world. But then it got better. And by better, I mean worse. So it got worse because basically Mexico is a very egalitarian, I can't say it properly, it's like entrepreneur, equal society. And that means that everyone also needs to contribute to things. So basically at the end, it happened just like any CPD course. There was about 30 other people in the room. About 30, I think 30 to 40 people. So about, 15 to 20 couples in the room. And the teacher, after talking to us for nearly an hour about what makes a good marriage, and literally all the different types of abuse, which was lovely. Oh, you said someone said Sina's just texted to say, I love how it's literally just before your wedding. Oh yeah, there was no turning back. What if we failed? You're done. No, it's just literally you show up and that's it. You've passed. But there was also a very young couple, a young pregnant couple about to get married, and I was like in the course, and they in the course as well, and I was like, I don't think they're going to be paying attention too much to this course. Anyway, it got worse because basically the presenter talked to us for nearly an hour. We were all stood up. There were no chairs. So we were all stood up because we were packed into a tiny room. So already, like, the attention deficit had kicked in to me quite significantly. Also, this was all in Spanish. This was nearly over 6 years ago. My Spanish wasn't as good as it is now, so I was struggling to play along. And basically, we got to the end, and it was like, any questions? Any questions? Any comments? And I was like, I looked at everyone and did the classic teacher look or classic student look of, guys, everyone keep your hands down. That means we can leave. But no. There were 3 people who put their hands up and went, yo creo marriage is like, I think marriage is like this and things like this, and it's all about teamwork, and like all the kind of generic comments that you can hear about marriage were said by these people who just wanted to talk because they wanted to talk. And then it got worse because 3 people had talked, it descended into circle time where everyone needs to say something. And I was like, but I didn't quite realize this until more people started to talk, and there were people getting closer and closer to me, going around in a circle. And I looked to my to-be wife and went, am I going to have to say something? And I was like, I don't know if I can say something. I'm like, I don't know if my Spanish is up to this. And I was like, so basically it got to me and they looked at me and I was like, but we've said everything. Yeah, see, and I basically went, see, yo creo para mí, I can't remember the word for marriage, but I said it there properly. Es un parte de equipo y necesita trabajar, con nosotras y necesita respeto, pero también amor. All of these kind of platitudes. Any Spanish teachers listening right now, please don't sledge either my grammar or my my accent or my vocabulary. But yeah, basically I was like, is that enough? And I basically said like 20 seconds of platitudes, but everyone else had been talking for about a minute each. So they were like, are you going to say more? And I was like, no, I'm good. I think we've said everything. But then it got worse. It was like, because the presenter went, él es extranjero, ¿no? It's like, he's a foreigner, right? And I was like, sí. Soy británico, soy de Inglaterra también. He's like, and he was like, pero él entiende español, sí? And it was like, he understands Spanish, yeah? Because obviously the marriage ceremony was going to be in Spanish. And I was like, yeah, claro que sí, totally. And then it proceeded around again. And so I would technically say that was a CPD course, but oh my God, it was probably one of the worst CPD courses I've ever been on in my life. And then the added pressure as well, right at the end, going, wow, if I mess up my Spanish, could this mean that they might not let me get married? I don't know. So yeah, getting married in Mexico is absolutely fun. A friend of mine did it. A friend of mine from school in the UK did it. He got married in Cancun. On the beach in Cancun as well, because apparently he's that type of person as well. I would highly recommend it. Also, the coolest thing for me as well was that it cost about a wedding in Cancun with real fun activities, plus the flights, hotels. Cost less than a wedding in the UK, so it was absolutely fantastic. So less than just like a reception and things in the UK, so it's absolutely fantastic. So yeah, we just had to put up with that one little lesson on marriage kind of thing. It was very much like when Homer gives lessons on how to run a good marriage, and he's like, the secret to marriage is it's like eating an orange or something like that. Yeah, it was very, very much like that in that respect. But we're talking about, well, I've been ranting and raving a little bit about Mexican bureaucracy, because that's probably what will happen every now and then when you live in Mexico. But we're talking about CPDs. What professional development have you found really useful? What insets have you found really useful? Are there any things that you would want to look for in the UK, or like build up your training on? But also, what are some of the horror stories of CPD that you've sat through? I've probably got two that really stand out for me. I've been very fortunate. Going back to what I mentioned as well, where I said that Mexico is quite traditional and it's like people talk at you and that means that you've learned something, that kind of filters into in-house CPD. We try and avoid it, but it does happen. So it does mean that sometimes you'll just be sat and talked to for an hour about something that isn't really applicable to you. And also the problem is as well that if you teach in a bilingual school and they don't do two simultaneous CPD sessions, what will happen is a CPD session will last twice as long, because you will have it in English and then you will pause. Someone will say something in English, someone will pause, and then they will say it in Spanish, or the presenter will be talking in Spanish and they will pause and you will say something in English. Unless you have two presenters willing to do one in English, one in Spanish, you really can't avoid that sometimes as well. So it can be really frustrating, because something that should take 20 minutes takes about 40 minutes or even longer. So that can be really, really frustrating, because you're just there like, come on, we can do this, we can get through this. So yeah, that's also really, really frustrating. But I would say the two most sort of horrific training courses I've had, I can't name the organization, but it's the international equivalent of Prince Philip's outdoor education program and outdoor education program. I think you know the one I mean. Is Prince Philip. He used to be the Duke of Edinburgh. That guy, yeah, the international version of it, basically. So yeah, obviously I didn't name the organization there at all, but you can get the idea. Anyway, the international version of that is probably less rigorous than the UK version, and the Americas version is even less rigorous, I would say. And basically what happened was I was running this program with some colleagues in my school in Brazil. And obviously part of this is that we need to be trained up to assess this specific award, for want of a better word, as well as be able to safely run it within school, because we would be the sole authorizing bodies for this award. And so luckily for us, we were teaching in Sao Paulo. We were teaching in Sao Paulo. So luckily for us, a course was going to be offered by another British school for several other schools in Rio de Janeiro, which meant that we got to fly to Rio de Janeiro. It doesn't sound as glamorous when you're in Sao Paulo, but we got to fly to Rio de Janeiro during Carnival, which was fantastic, to go on this training course. We actually had a British school in Bolivia come in, and the only reason that they flew into this training course is they wanted to run this prestigious award, but also they wanted to experience, it was basically all the senior managers, and all the senior managers wanted a jolly to Rio during Carnival. So like basically we were stuck with like 4 or 5 teachers who will never run this award, but were like, yeah, we're going to be here for a couple of days, and then we're going to stay and go to the blocos and to the I can't remember to the Samba, I can't say it properly, Sambodromo and places like that, to see the parades and things like that. And we're like, oh, that's nice for you. And like afterwards, we were like, we have to fly back to Sao Paulo and actually teach. We don't get the day off. But it was a 2-day course. The first course was all about first hour of the course was all about branding for this award, which is very much the definition of Who Cares. And then also how to use like the online software, which again was very much the definition of Who Cares. And they made us log in as students and complete a complete record book, which normally takes 3 months to 6 months. And they made us log it in so that we were completely familiar with the situation and with the login details of this. And we were like, I know how a website works. Why am I paying you money to do this? Or why is my school paying you money to do this? But it got even worse. Basically, the runners of the award in this area, or this very prestigious award, are based in, I think it's Trinidad. Yeah, they're based in Trinidad for all of the Americas. And the leader was from Trinidad, and his approach to outdoor education was very, very much different to our approach to outdoor education. So one thing he suggested was like, okay, when they're camping, when the students are camping, they can cook instant noodles. That's very, very healthy and delicious. And I was like, no, it's not. That's like, basically we all looked at each other and went, no, it's not. That's literally the least best thing that they could be eating right now. Like they could be cooking something else. And the following day we were going to go hiking in the rainforest just outside of the city, which was absolutely fantastic. But we looked at the maps that they'd given us, and they were old 70-year-old maps, army maps from the 70s that were so out of date. 1 to 50,000 scale, so not like the Ordnance Survey maps here. And we were like, okay. And I was like, well, luckily I've got my GPS and I've got my compass, and we can hike this route. And it was only supposed to be an 8-kilometer route. And so we're like, okay, cool, this is fine. And they were like, when we got there, the people running the course showed up in jeans and Converse in the jungle in Brazil, where it was getting to 35 degrees. And basically me and the 3 other colleagues from the school, we were all showed up in, like very lightweight hiking pants, hiking boots, sturdy lightweight hiking boots that were slightly waterproof, like Breathe Right or whatever, our Dry Fit sort of running t-shirt, so it's nice and light, good pack with lots of water. We brought all of our own equipment and everything like that. And the lead guy just walked out with jeans and a t-shirt, a cotton t-shirt. And I was like, this is this is 35 degrees. Well, we may lose him. And then basically I was like, look, I just want to check where we are on the map. Here's my GPS. Here are the coordinates. Can you just can we just confirm that we are here and this is the route that we are going to go on? Because I want to make sure so we're, safe. And he was like, oh, don't worry. It's all just pretend. It's all just pretend. I was like, no, it's not pretend. We're walking 8 kilometers. You've arranged an 8-kilometer hike and I need to know the route. Basically what happened was me and my colleagues finished the hike in a relatively quick time. We sat basically where there was going to be a barbecue planned for us, and they hadn't started cooking yet. And 2 hours later, the leader of the training course showed up basically completely drenched. I think his jeans were kind of like stonewashed denim, and they became just basically dark blue, dripping in moisture and sweat. And he was like, I did not realize that the jungles of Brazil were going to be that hot. And I was like, yes, they are. So that was probably the worst. It was the most entertaining training course. It also meant that I got to go with some of my colleagues, some of my mates from school to Rio de Janeiro and go on an amazing hike that we were very competent to do. But if I was not competent with mountaineering or hiking in general, I would be very, very concerned. And especially when the leaders of the expedition rucked up in Converse shoes. I mean, we were hiking mountains as well. It wasn't just like a flat surface. So yeah, that was interesting. I would say the other horror story for me for training courses was right at the start in my first school in the UK. They hired the management had hired someone because morale was at an all-time low. So they hired a motivational speaker, and this motivational speaker was a former boxer, a former amateur boxer, I think a former bare knuckle boxer by the sounds of it. But basically had no idea of basically how a school run. He was a motivational speaker in quotation marks. I tried to find his website to see if it was still around, but this was about 11 years ago. And I think he's very much either retired or residing at His Majesty's pleasure, Her Majesty's pleasure. Because he would basically, in an auditorium full of teachers who were quite low on morale, the school had definitely a morale issue. He basically wandered round and proceeded to pick on people, like call them out and ask them questions, and then kind of like in an offensive stand-up routine, would just insult them and just tell them that, basically cheer up, stop being miserable, and then randomly pick on people and insult them to their face in front of their senior managers and their colleagues. And this was around, 100 staff members as well. And I just remember sinking further into my seat. If you've seen Phoenix Nights, it's kind of like when they do the talent show and they hire a stand-up comic who basically insults all of the audience, insults one of the members one of the members of the audience right in the front, who's a big guy, and then got biffed right in the face. It was very, very much like that, other than the physical violence. But I think about 5 or 6 teachers just literally stood up and walked out during the training session. and management had to send an apology and went basically lessons learned, we're so sorry about that, which was very big of them. At least they apologized for it. I very much get the feeling that it was a mate of a mate who was recommending them, and yeah, it was just probably not the best training course there. We're going to pause very, very briefly for one more commercial, and then we have 10 minutes left on the Late Late Show with me, Rich Wrigley. Please do text in with what are your apologies for that. My multitasking was way off point there, but please do text in with what are some of your horror show stories of CPD training courses. We'll just pause briefly for a commercial break.
Introducing Amanda Davey. Amanda is one of the first specialist teacher assessors for dyscalculia in the UK and offers dyscalculia tutoring and bespoke training for schools. With 26 years of teaching and tutoring experience in the UK, Amanda offers specialist online tuition focused on building confidence and developing skills. Amanda also offers online and face-to-face training on dyscalculia for educators, informing practitioners as to how to identify children that may have dyscalculia and how to support them in class. Find out more about Amanda and what she can offer you at www.amanda-davey-dyscalculia.co.uk. Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. At Creative Resources, we've been rethinking what a classroom can be. We've created a huge range of more than 2,500 original and exciting resources that span across more than 15 different subject areas. Whether you're looking for primary or secondary level resources, careers options, PSHE, arts, or humanities, Creative Resources have the resources for you. We offer full curriculum packages and unique, challenging escape rooms themed on topics such as Shakespeare, Tudors, and fractions. We have quizzes, task cards, Tarsier puzzles, and lots more. Better still, more than 100 resources can be accessed for free. Just visit our website, www.cre8tiveresources.com. You can get 10% off any order you make on our website by using the discount code TTRadio. Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers.
So thanks for that. Thanks for a brief message for our sponsors. You're joining me on the last 7 minutes of the Late Late Show with me, Rich Wrigley. We've been talking about CPD horror stories. What kind of professional development would you require? What are your goals in the future? And for me, there's one teacher training course that I really, really want to go on. Obviously, if you've stuck around on any of the Late Late shows in the past, you'll notice that I'm slightly into space. I may drop it in the conversation every now and then that I have a degree in space science and technology, which is kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like someone who runs a marathon. Like, it's like what's harder than running a marathon? Not talking about running a marathon. So yeah, it's a similar thing. If you've got a degree in physics, you're like, oh yes, when I was doing my degree. But anyway, I absolutely adore anything to do with space, and the Space Academy Teachers Conference in the UK is absolutely fantastic. Also, ESRO, ESRO is a fantastic, I think it's called the European Space Resource Office. It's run by the European Space Agency, run by ESA. If you type in ESRO or ESA into Google and teaching resources, they run workshops in Rotterdam and in Maastricht in the Netherlands, because that's where the European Space Agency sort of press offices, but also their outreach offices are. So they will run a teacher academy, teacher summer workshops every summer. I'm not sure if they're doing it this summer, obviously because of the global situation, but they are absolutely fantastic, and they really give you a lot of good ideas for teaching resources and things like that if you're a science teacher or a physics teacher. Obviously as well, I was fortunate enough and privileged enough while I was teaching in Germany to be able to organize a trip to CERN and to tour the complex. But one course that they run every year is also a summer school for science teachers. They're not running it this year, sadly, again, because of the global situation, but that's somewhere where I'd absolutely dream to go. It's free. I think basically all you have to do is pay for your accommodation. Kind of expensive, bearing in mind it's going to be in Geneva. But yeah, you have to pay for your accommodation, and I think your flights out there, and I think like breakfast and dinner. I think they provide lunch basically. But yeah, so like it's a week-long course. So basically you have to find a way of funding yourself to get there and stay there for a week. It's absolutely fantastic. I've heard nothing but great things. And if I was still living in Europe, I would very, very much be pushing my heads of faculty, my senior managers to take me on a course like that. Another course along these lines is also they do a teachers conference in the Houston Space Center in NASA as well. It's a week-long course every February. Obviously, being in Mexico, I'm quite close to Houston, and it's something that I would love to try and do. It normally runs during the half term, which is really fortunate because normally the US don't have half terms as well. So it's something that I would love to kind of, they've just very serendipitously linked up. It's something that I would love to check out as well, because basically you get like loads of educational resources about how to teach space and link it into any STEM subject. But you're at mission control at Houston, and you get a tour of all the complex as well. So, you know, how awesome is that going to be? But yeah, so I think I'm afraid that's it for time for the Late Late Show with me, Rich Wrigley, this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to all of you this evening. Join me again next week at the same time, where we'll be discussing another couple of topics in education for your evening listening pleasure. Thank you again for tuning in, and I will see you the same time next week. Take care, everyone. Have a lovely evening, everyone. Thanks, Seema. That's always really positive when people like say nice things as well. Thank you so much. That's really nice. Right. Okay. Take care, everyone, and I will speak to y'all next week.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.